Hey everyone, today I am going to be making this lined boxy pouch with you. There are a lot of tutorials out there for boxy pouches. The reason that mine is different is that instead of turning through a hole in the lining, we will be turning through the corners and then putting binding on those corners. The binding on the corners gives a lot of nice structure to your finished bag. It means that you only have to box 4 corners instead of 8, as some patterns have you do. And it also means that on the inside of your bag, there's no bulky seam there in the middle. This is one that is inside out, so you can see what the binding will look like. I'm using waterproof canvas. I like that as it doesn't really fray. You can use other types of binding, but you may need to fold the ends over so that it's not going to fray on you, or you can use any other type of non-fray material. My choice is waterproof canvas, so that's what I'm going to show you today. We're going to be making a bag this size, but you can make these pouches in varying different sizes, and I will give you some different measurements at the end of the video, keeping in mind that you do have to turn your bag through the corner, the boxed corner, which means that if you're making a bigger sized bag, you want to have a slightly bigger corner. Some of these other shapes that I have done, where the bag is wider, are a little hard to get the bulk through the fairly small opening there. So these can be done. They were a little harder to turn. This one was fine to turn, and this one was fine to turn. So I'll give you some of those measurements at the end. You can make your own call. The one that I'm going to go ahead and do is this fun size here with the binding on the inside. So let's get going. Materials that you will need today are your waterproof canvas. You will need cotton woven fabric. This is a quilting weight, quilting cotton weight, so I have interfaced this with woven interfacing. You will also need a piece of fusible fleece. The measurements of these will vary depending on the size that you want your pouch to be at the end. But for the one that I'm going to make today, I have got a piece that is 11 inches wide and 12 inches long for my waterproof canvas. The same for my interfaced cotton fabric, and my fleece scrap is 6.5 inches by 10 inches. I also have a small scrap of waterproof canvas 4x4 that I will be using for the binding. Other things that you will need today are your zipper, that is the length of your pouch plus about an inch or so, zipper pull, something to measure, some things to cut, melting, stapler, pliers, double-sided tape, and your clips. For the pouch that I'm making today, I'm using a piece of cotton woven that is 11 inches wide and 12 inches long. I am using a non-directional print. If you are using a directional print, your pouch will go this way. So if you have a print that faces upwards, you're going to want it that way. It will be upside down on the back unless you cut it as 2 pieces and do a joining seam at the bottom. You can check out the directional print instructions on the Logie pouch to see how you would do that. For this size, for example, instead of having one piece that is 11 by 12, you would have 2 pieces, 11 wide, and then you would do 6 inches plus your seam allowance. So you'd probably do 11 by 6 3/8, sew them together along that bottom seam, press it open and top stitch, and then you can continue forth with your single exterior piece. So that piece is the cotton woven that is already interfaced. I need a piece of waterproof canvas that is the same size, 11 inches wide by 12 inches tall. And then the scrap that I will cut into 4 1-inch pieces. And then the last thing that we need is a piece of fleece. I don't like to have my fleece covering the entire of the exterior. I like to just have it centered here. These bits form the sides of the pouch. They don't need to have the fleece on them. So I like to have a piece that fits in the middle, and it is shorter at the top and the bottom so that I'm not sewing it into my zipper, and shorter on the sides. So this piece is 6.5 inches wide by 10 inches. And I will center that on my exterior here and go and fuse that on. And then we will go and do the zipper. I have here my exterior and my interior fabric, both cut as their 11 by 12 rectangles. If you want to put a tag on your interior, you want to place it in the top half here. If you place it too far down, it's going to end up on the bottom of your bag. If you place it too far up, it's going to end up being in the top part of your bag. So I just like to center mine about 1/4 of the way down and then in the center here. That obviously is optional. I'm going to go and pop that on real quick and then we will proceed. Grab your double-sided tape and we're just going to put it across the top and the bottom of both the exterior and the lining piece. Now we're going to take our zipper tape that is cut to be about 3/4 of an inch longer on either side of our exterior. We're going to take a peek at it and see which side sticks further out and just put a little snip there and on the other side too, so that when we are putting on our zipper pull, we know which side to start from. Starting with the exterior, I'm going to peel off the backing from our double-sided tape and put the teeth facing down. And we're just going to line this up with the edge of our exterior fabric, pressing it down onto the Now we're going to peel the backing off the interior. And then I like to line up the ends as we sandwich that zipper tape between the layers, lining up the edge of the exterior and the interior, and then pressing that down onto the tape also, and checking that everything is nice and lined up and square. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this side of the zipper using my zipper foot. I use the width of the zipper foot as my measurement for my seam allowance, and I line it up with the edge of the material here to get a nice straight line against my zipper tape without any wobbles in it. So I'm going to head over and do that now. I have my needle set in the far left position for my zipper foot. I'm using the edge of my zipper foot here, lined up with the edge of the material to get a straight stitch line. And I'm using a stitch length of 2.4 is the length that I like to use on my machine. Your machine may vary, so make sure that you do some tests on some scraps of material so that you know you're getting the correct stitch length for the material that you're using. Now I'm going to sew the zipper tape to the other side. Open that out. I like to finger press that down here a bit to get a nice tight fold. Peel the backing tape off the other edge. Then I'm going to line it up with the edge here. Then the same on the other side. You can pull that a little tight so that it's nice and flat so you can see that you're lining it up. And then you're going to press that exterior fabric down using the double-sided tape right up to the edge of that zipper tape. Smooth that down, flip it around. Same thing, I like to pull on my lining here, finger press it down. Take the backing tape off this side. I'm using 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape. Keeps it out of my stitch line. I'll just straighten that up a little bit. Okay, now we're going to press this down here, lining up the edge of the zipper tape and both the interior and the exterior here, sandwiching that tape in the middle. Press it down nice and firmly. Then we're going to head back over to the sewing machine and sew this side of the zipper tape. At this point, I like to melt the end of my zippers, my zipper tape, and trim any threads. Double check that you have marked which side you want to start putting your zipper pull on from. Then you can open up your zipper tape. What we're going to do now is flip it around. To have the exterior facing out. And we're going to go and top stitch next to this zipper. I like to give a pretty good tug on the zipper tape there to get it to come out nice and flat. You can iron that, finger press, or use a seam roller. Pulling on it to make sure it's even and straight. Then we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch here. I'm going to switch over to just my regular zipper foot, and I'm going to sew using the edge of my zipper foot lined up with the fold here in the seam to get a nice straight top stitch. I use a 4 for my stitch length when I am top stitching. You can check on your machine based on your materials to see what is the optimum stitch length for your top stitching. Let's head back over to the machine. You can also, if you like, change thread color for your top stitching. I have switched over to a yellow thread for my top stitching so that it blends in better here. If you are not confident in your top stitching, using a color that blends in well with your exterior is a great idea, so that if there's any variation in your stitch length, or if it's not quite as straight as you might like, it's not super obvious. If you used a contrasting color, then it's going to catch the eye of anyone who's looking at it. Something else that I learned the other day, everything in sewing is always a constant learning experience. A little suggestion was to start the top stitching on the side here. This is not going to work for all types of top stitching, but it does work on this particular pouch. So what I'm going to do here is turn the open seam here so that it is underneath the presser foot, and I'm just going to do my back stitching in this side seam allowance here. So I'm just going to go forward and back, and then back again, then pivot the material 90 degrees, and then I'm going to continue my top stitching down here, and that hides the back stitching in the side seam. The seam allowance that we're taking on this is great enough that that would probably be inside of the seam allowance anyway, but it does make for an aesthetically pleasing end result if you don't have any of the back stitching visible next to your zipper. Sew all the way to the end, turn 90 degrees again, and then back stitch off to the side here. I thought that was a great little tip. And I'm going to just repeat on the other side. With the top stitching done, what I will do now is secure my threads and melt and snip any ends off to keep the inside of the bag nice and neat. Now we're going to turn the bag back inside out. and we are going to put on our zipper pull. Now you can have a look and decide which way you want your zipper pull to go. If you have a print that is non-directional and it doesn't matter, then you can do it however you choose. If you are concerned about where your tag is going to be, then you can take that into consideration. My tag is here, and I like my pulls to go that way with my tag on the back. So I'm going to put mine on from this end. Having a look at my zipper tape, this is the end that I have clipped, which means I want this part of the zipper tape to be sticking further out. I'm going to slide the zipper pull on, and I'm going to pinch the tape between my thumb and forefinger, pulling that tape towards the outside of the zipper head. Then I'm going to slide that on, and then I'm going to hold it on that side and just pull down with my right hand until I feel it click. Then I push with my index finger, and then I take a look there, and you can see that it is on. The edge of the zipper is not mismatched, and it is further out on the side that I have marked. So I'm happy with that install. I'm going to pull the zipper all the way through and off. Now my zipper is closed, and then I'm going to open it back out about 2 inches and a repeat. And that means that when I am sewing the ends of my bag, my zipper tape will be closed, which makes it a lot easier to get a nice, neat seam on the end there. Same thing, and just pull it through halfway. Okay, now what I'm going to do is mark the center of the exterior and the center of the lining. I'm going to do that by folding my zipper so that the fold of the exterior fabric here, where we sewed it to the zipper tape, lines up. Then I'm going to pull that taut and crease there, put a little snip to mark the center. And I'm going to repeat on the other side, fold the zipper in half, pinch that together, lining up the fold there in the exterior fabric, pull it taut, and then snip. Then we're going to repeat for the lining the same way, folding the zipper, lining up the curves there, the folds there, pull it taut, pinch, put a little snip there, and then the last one, we will have the center marked on both ends on the exterior and the lining. Now what we're going to do is line the center that we just marked up with the center of the zipper. Grab some clips, clip that in place, both sides, turn it over, the center mark there, center that on your zipper tape, so you are sandwiching all of the layers together. So we have got here the exterior folded and the interior folded. Turn it around, line that mark up with the center of the zipper, pop a clip in, the same again on the other side, lining that little mark we made up with the center of the zipper, put that in place. So now we've got our exterior folded, our interior folded, and the next thing we're going to do is cut our boxes. When we are measuring our boxed corners, we need to account for the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on either end here. The size box that I'm going to use for this pouch is 1 1/4 plus the 3/8 seam allowance on the end there. So that makes it 1 1/4 tall here and 1 5/8 deep. So I'm going to cut in here on each of the 4 corners. And when I cut through, I'm cutting through the lining as well. To help keep the layers together, I like to put a clip here and here. Sometimes they get in the way a little bit when you're cutting, so you may have to slide them out of the way. But you can just work around that. If you want to, you can mark it with a pen and then cut it that way, if that will help you to be more accurate in your cutting. Keep in mind that it can slide around a bit, so keep some downward pressure. And we're just going to slice up 1 5/8, 1 1/4. I like to leave the corner itself uncut so that I'm not cutting into the body of the fabric, and just snip that with my scissors. Flip it over, repeat on the other side. So you can see there, we've cut through the exterior and the lining, the box shape there. We're going to repeat on each of the other 3 corners and keep 2 of the cutouts, as we're going to use those for our tabs at either end of our zipper. We've got all the corners now cut out on this pouch. We're going to pop that aside just for a moment. Grab 2 of the corner cutouts of the exterior fabric, or if you want to, you can use your lining fabric. I'm going to cut these. Whatever the length is fine. For these, it's 2 1/2, but I want them to be 1 1/4 inch wide. So I'm going to cut those 2. I prefer to cut it from the center of the piece, just so that the lines are as straight as possible. Sometimes when you're cutting your boxes out, the sides are not exactly straight. Now what I'm going to do is fold these to the center, and then I'm going to take it over to my iron, and I'm going to iron both sides down. If you have double-sided tape, you can put that in the middle there. For the tabs, I like to use thicker double-sided tape. This one is 3/8 of an inch thick. Just put a little piece in the center. But you don't have to use tape. You can just fold it in, or you can draw a line to help guide you to the center. Peel the backing off. Fold it in. Fold it in. Then we're going to go over to the iron, and we're just going to iron that down. While I have the iron on, I'm also going to take the pieces of the waterproof canvas that we cut earlier, and I'm going to fold those in half and iron those as well while the iron is hot. So I've folded my binding pieces in half and ironed those. We can set those aside for now. I have my zipper end tabs. You can take those over to your sewing machine and you can top stitch those just around the outside if you want to. You don't have to. It's just personal preference. I'm going to quickly do those on mine, and then we're going to get them tucked in here. So I will be back. I'm going to grab these tabs, fold those in half. Let me just snip off a couple of little loose threads that are there. Neaten those up. What I'm going to do is just tuck that in here. So the tab should fit between the 2 sides of your exterior there. So I'm just pop those clips off for a moment. Tuck that in there. And I like to have it about 1/4 of an inch hanging past the edge. Because they're quite long tabs, there's still a really good amount here on the inside. That just makes it less likely that they're going to pull out of that side seam. So you can pop a clip back there and a clip back there. But what I also like to do is pop a staple in. So grab my stapler slide that in there and just pop a staple in the seam allowance. Flip it around, same on the other side. Now we are ready to sew the end seams here. We're going to sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance because that is the measurement that we added when we cut our boxes out. You want this side here to be the same length as this side here from the corner to the seam allowance. So the fold to the corner should be equal to the corner to the seam allowance. So we're going to sew 3/8 on either side, and then we're going to come back over here to turn the pouch through the corner. If you have a hump jumper or a Gina-majig or a similar tool, I find that to be useful when you get to this tab here, as there's a fair bit of bulk there. So I'm going to pop the clip out of the way, back stitching at the beginning, sew all the way across, pop my hump jumper underneath as I get to the bulk, watching out also for your staple, going back, forward again, clip out of the way. I like to put my hump jumper under the front of the presser foot here, watching out for the needle, just to catch it as it comes off so it doesn't skip that stitch there. Take it nice and easy, lower it down all the way to the end and back stitch. And then I'm going to repeat on the other side. With both ends sewn here, I'm just going to remove the staples that we popped in to keep the tabs in place and snip any loose threads. Then we are going to turn the pouch. When we are turning, we are going to be turning the entire pouch through one of these corners. It does put a little bit of stress on the corner piece, which is why I spoke about not using too small of a corner for too big of a bag at the start of the video. I also like to turn it through the lining piece as opposed to the exterior, because if you do happen to cause any tearing or stress at the corner here, I would rather it was on the interior that we're going to cover up with binding, and we have some more options for repair when it's on the inside compared to the exterior where it may just interfere with the finished look of your bag. What we're going to do first is make sure that our zipper is open. So slide your hand in there. If you didn't open it earlier, push it. The good thing is, if you have a zipper that's tricky to open from the back, you can still access the front through the corner here. So make sure that is open. And then we're going to start turning. Just pick any corner, and we are just going to take the whole exterior, and we're just popping it through so it comes out this corner here. And this can take a little bit of time. I also like to lead with the zipper, as that's kind of bulky. If you can get that through, then you're well on your way. The last thing that we need to do to finish the bag is to box our corners and bind them. So to do that, we have to have the bag back inside out. I like to pull the zipper up more towards the middle so that I can get a nice flat bag. Fold that down there, pinching the corner here and pulling the exterior here. I like to put a little clip here to mark the center. I'm going to go around and do that on each of these corners. Now, I'm going to put my hand in here, and what we're going to do is line up the center mark that we just made with the seam here. So if you can see that line there, that lines up with the little mark that we just did. Pulling the exterior too, so that it's nice and snug, lined up with your lining. Hold that down and pop a clip in the middle. Then I like to tuck my hand in and push the exterior fabric right up into the corner so that you have a nice smooth exterior of your bag. I'm going to clip there again. The bottom corner here. And then we're going to repeat that 3 more times. We're going to go over to the sewing machine now, and we're going to sew these corners. They have the raw edge here, which will be covered up by the binding strips that we made earlier. I'm going to sew mine with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can use a slightly narrower seam allowance if you wish. As long as you are consistent between your 4 corners, it won't matter on your end product. But I like 3/8, and then I will cover that up with that binding. So we'll go over to the machine, we'll sew this on each of the corners, and then we'll pop that binding over the top. Just make sure that your corners are nice and smooth on the inside before sewing that corner. I also like to backstitch, obviously at the beginning and the end, but in the center, I also like to do a couple of extra stitches where the fold is on the end seam, just to give it a bit of extra support where the bulk is. I'm going to trim all the threads here, and then we are going to pop the binding over that exposed seam there. Take a piece of binding, and we're just going to fold it around the seam with overhang on either side, and then clip it in place. I like to put a clip in the middle and to clip at either end. Then we're going to sew down here using the same seam allowance as we did for the corner. I start my seam, my stitch line, where you can feel the corner of the bag is. So there is some overhang. I don't start sewing until I get onto the bulk of the bag, because we will trim that overhang at the end. Back stitch, and then holding that in place. You can use a stiletto if you want. I just kind of like try to pinch it in place, and then just sewing straight down. Clip out of the way. I tuck that in a little more to keep it nice and snug. To the edge of the bag again, not to the edge of the binding. Back stitch, forward, pull it tight, and then check that you caught the binding on both sides, and then we will go and repeat that on the other 3 corners. We are nearly finished What we need to do is neaten up these corners here. We're going to trim the threads, and then we are going to snip these corners. If you can see here, the stitch line goes from just in from the edge here. If you follow that angle there, you can see where I've started my stitch line. It was a little bit trickier to show you over at the sewing machine, but it goes just along here. So we can snip these corners here without cutting any of the threads. After we neaten up these, the way that I like to do it is fold the binding under to get an idea of where I want to cut it, because I don't want to cut into the body of the bag. And then I just snip straight along. Let me just tidy up those threads real quick, and then I can show you that. So fold it, and then I'm just going to snip along there's kind of a crease there where I folded it. I'm just going to snip parallel to the bag. And what I'm also going to do is snip the pointy corners here, as it'll tuck in a little nicer. So we're going to go around and repeat that on all the corners, melting or tying the threads, and then snipping those very ends of the binding off. Because we turn this through such a small hole, the materials that you used for your inside and your outside may be a little creased. So I'm going to press this waterproof canvas quickly to try to smooth it out. Then I'm going to turn it just through this opening here, and then I'm going to press the outside as well. The waterproof canvas on the cloth side can be ironed. On the plasticky side, it cannot be. So that's just pressed and zipped up a little just to show you the inside of the bag, which I don't know about you, but to me, I think that looks pretty nice and neat for the inside of a bag. So I'm really happy with that. I'm going to unzip it. And because it is just inside out, we just pop it back out through the zipper opening. Going to poke the corners out with my thumb there to get just a really good shape. Then I'm going to go and press that again to get any creases out of the exterior fabric like we did for the lining. Then we'll be able to see our finished product. And there it is, the finished lined Bee Boxy bag with the waterproof canvas on the inside. Gives it a nice clean lining. The binding gives it some good structure. And you can make it in all different sizes, keeping in mind that the box that you cut out has to be big enough for you to turn the bag through. So I'll pop some suggested measurements at the end of the video, but I'd love to see what you come up with experimenting with this. And hopefully, despite the fact that boxy bag tutorials seem to be a dime a dozen out there, you have gained something from watching this video. And if you are interested in the clear vinyl version of this bag, then that is also available on my channel. Thanks, everybody.